Nikita, you can see and hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm like foolishly grinning at Nikita.
I can see electricity हो रही है.
No, how do I see both of your faces together? I can only see the face of the person who's talking.
Wait, you can control that. No, you can't. I can see both Nisha and Nikita.
Me too. I see both of you with your respective landscapes.
My landscape. Okay. You have to change the view in settings, it seems, Nikita. You will have something called settings or even I haven't figured all of this out.
I'm told that Microsoft Teams exists to torture people. Apparently, that is its major purpose.
100%. I'm sure all the teachers here will agree with you.
This is only the second time I've used it, so I haven't experienced its full glory yet.
You've done it as a panel like this before on Teams?
Just once before, but it seems okay. So, whose Maha Brave idea was that poster?
The first one or the second one?
Both were equally brave only. The reading Malayalam writing, I was looking at it laughing. I was like, what provocations? Provocations are being offered.
Reading Malayalam, writing English was Arulmani. Mine was all the Dinchak design for the poster.
It was really Dinchak. I liked it. But all your posters are good. I mean, that with design, I was like, okay, cool.
All the students only.
Very good. One year there was a full, like highly colorful pulpy design. I think maybe 2 years ago. Like lots of like crazy designs. I think it was 2 years ago. Maybe 2019 perhaps.
Some yellow, Dinchak, red.
Yeah, very Dinchak. It was very exciting.
Yeah. So Nikita, how are you feeling?
What happened to Nikita?
I'm feeling slightly scared.
You're scared, why?
But
I don't know. I'm just
after touching Nisha Susan in public, you're feeling scared. At the panel that day, you went and touched her, and now you're feeling scared.
Oh my God. How you were shaming us both like this? Touch.
So the idea was that it basically I've been thinking about this for a while now, especially since last month. One first year student told me, "Ma'am, I don't think I can write very well because I have not suffered enough." And I felt, what is this? Should you meet Imtiaz Ali? Should you be Ranbir Kapoor? Why should you suffer? And I started giggling, and she said, "No, but I think that if I suffer, I can become an artist." And I said, "Okay, cool, but this is very interesting." And then we talked and talked and talked, and then I started taking other stories to her class, that cavish piece. And then I asked her, does it look like this person is suffering when they are writing? And then we did your Trinity piece. I said, does it look like she's suffering when she's writing? She said, no.
Really suffering.
Looks like she had a good, nice stomachache from all the laughing, but no suffering. So acha laga.
Nice.
So that was a plan that we do this to sort of diffuse this. I have to suffer to write, or I have to have some enlightenment Buddha type to write. So how to diffuse that?
Oh, nice. There's a book I'm reading right now. So I'm reading S. Harish's Mustache in English and Malayalam in parallel. Okay. This is like self-imposed study class. Okay. I'm like 10 pages here, 10 pages here, 10 pages. And frankly, it is quite tough. Okay. Because there's a lot of nature descriptions and plants and animals and stuff which I don't know. I have to look up all of those words and names. It's really good. So most of it is set in the 1930s, but there's a bit where it steps into the present, and in the present, the narrator, which is Harish, goes to a book launch. Okay, and it's his friend's book launch. Friend meaning they're in some writing group, small writing group, and the most just person in that group is one quote unquote journalist who takes his writing very seriously. Okay, so that person has somehow gotten his book published. Okay, and he's called some prominent dignitaries and all for that. It's a small town, and everybody is gone. So this narrator has also been invited to share the stage and give some thoughts. So, as part of his thoughts, he says that storytelling is the most essential part of literature, and that is why literature exists and whatever. So, this woke young man in the audience stands up and shames him, okay, and says, people are dying, and you're talking about storytelling, having a shame, and all, okay. And then this guy is like totally upset because there are two good-looking girls in the audience, and they are looking at the woke young man, and like vibing is happening. So he's like more angry about the good looks of the woke young man and how he's probably going to get some action after this book launch. Okay, so I found it very comical. Just Harish has obviously decided I will put in my opinions about the reasons for literature inside. It was very fun.
Is this S. Harish?
Yes, Harish. I actually have the book. I'll just bring it. One sec.
Nikita Thomas, where's your chai? You were dying chai.
I don't actually drink chai outside of the department.
It's 5 o'clock. Okay.
I sort of brought a pile of books. So this is Misha in Malayalam.
Okay.
And this is Misha.
Arey,
It's
okay.
fully Gita types. So it's quite a fun section, that bit where he's having a fit. Snack book.
You're moving back and forth, as in, you doing like this bit, that bit together?
Yeah, so I'm reading 20 pages, 10 pages back and forth at a time, and it's really helping also to slow down my reading. Otherwise, I read fast and sometimes I miss out stuff. So so it's quite an enjoyable process because the translation is very accomplished. It's also nice to just read for that reason. It's a super book. I highly encourage everyone to read it. It's very entertaining.
Thanks. I think people have already started making notes of it.
It's very good. So it's, I mean, the general, the blurb about it is that this sort of an uproar starts when a young Dalit man grows a mustache, and that's where it begins. But actually, that's like sort of representative of just one general wild anarchy. Okay, it's this guy Vavachan, who grows the mustache, is like a anarchic figure who's running through the landscape of Kuttaran. Okay, so every story that Harish can think of from that period has been stuffed into it like one Kolkata. It's like superb. It is. Apparently, he worked on it for 8 years, so it's lovely.
You know him?
No, please, nothing. I read one interview and I was very excited by the interview because he said some many cheap things about Malayalis which made me laugh a lot. It was very good.
Okay, we can start. It's 5. We'll start. Amazing. We have okay. Annie, are you here? We have another fan, your fan, Miss Annie Lewis, who is going to MC for us.
Oui.
Annie, come in. Annie, come in.
Hi, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're
Yes,
audible,
yes,
but we can't see you.
But where are you? And
Ma'am, my network.
I'm sounding like a Madhu
I'm
Jackson
so
song.
sorry. My network is really bad, and I'm switching between data and Wi-Fi, and it keeps going off.
Okay. Good.
Can I start?
Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to today's panel, Reading Malayalam, Writing English, a conversation with writer Nisha Susan, Professor Vijayata Kumar, and Nikita Thomas. Nisha Susan is a Bangalore-based writer and journalist. Her book, The Woman Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories, was released last August. I've heard a lot of wonderful things about Nisha Susan, but the best so far has been Drishti Ma'am's advice, which is when in doubt, read Nisha Susan.
Oh,
Nisha
God.
Susan will be in conversation with two panelists. The first is Nikita Thomas, a former EJP student and an ardent Nisha Susan fan. She writes film and book reviews that tickles you. You can read her review of Nisha Susan's book on the Open Dosa website. The second panelist is Professor Vijayata Kumar. She's a writer, a creative writing and journalism professor at St. Joseph's College. On bad days, listening to her classes and reading her writing is my glass of warm milk. And she's very generous about sharing her secret on how to extract strength from words. Please stalk her Instagram if you haven't already. Her superpowers include bringing Nisha Susan and other such wonderful writers to class and drink endless cups of chai. Now let's listen to the three heroines talk. Over to you, Nikita Thomas.
Thank you, Annie.
I'm done.
Just going to head now. Thanks, Annie.
Thank you,
Annie,
ma'am.
I don't know what is wrong with your network, but I refuse to believe that anything is wrong with your network. I think you just wanted to shoot that into the air and run away.
Ma'am, I really promise my data is 90% and I'm hoping to just attend the meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, Annie.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Annie. Uh, uh, Welcome to day 2 of Meta 2021. Um, and thank you to Nikita Thomas, former EJP student, batch 2016-17, sorry.
No, ma'am. That's
Something. Or batch 17. Uh, Nikita Thomas wrote a very nice review of Nisha Susan's book, The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories, in which it appears as though she has eaten the book and is now living with the book. Uh, and this is the kind of relationship that I've always found very interesting. What students have with books and how they fall in love with these books and treat these books. Uh, Thanks also to Miss Nisha Susan, who is here, bomb writer Nisha Susan, who is here. Thank you very much. Uh, I was just telling her before the panel began that a student of mine asked me 1 month ago that I don't know if I can write because I haven't suffered enough and I don't know what to do. And the only two people and the one among the many people I thought of introducing the student to was Nisha Susan. Because until I discovered Nisha Susan's writing, for me, writing was always something that I had to struggle with. That if I haven't suffered enough with it, like the student was saying, that it's not good enough. That some dabba proverb I read, some statement. Writing is like sitting in front of a typewriter and opening a vein or some such heroic thing. And I kept thinking, yeah, this is what has to happen, and it's never happened with me. Maybe I'm not good enough. And then I kept sitting in front of the computer trying to write in an English that was very far away, trying to make these words sound like carpentry, trying to bring that magic on the screen, and it was never happening. And then I discovered Nisha Susan's writing, uh, and it felt like she was playing. It felt like she was having fun when she was writing. If you've seen these, if you have a late evening walk on your streets, you will find one or two old ladies wearing nighties and playing football, or you'll find some auntie wearing sari and just sort of having fun. So always I keep thinking that Nisha Susan's writing is like that. It's that kind of freedom you experience where the things that you're wearing don't stop you from having fun. So her writing has always been like a playground for me. And so in this panel, we are hoping we can talk about how writing can become play. And a big part of Nisha Susan's writing is that it's in an English that is very comfortable, that is very familiar, that you don't have to open a vein for in order to produce. So that's why this is just to show you why, sort of tell you why we've decided on this idea and what we hope to achieve with this. Uh, so I'd like to also tell you that basically this electricity between Nisha Susan and Nikita Thomas, which I'm trying to absorb, I don't want to delay that any longer. So Nikita Thomas will now begin the panel officially for us, and I'm just here to sort of interject now and then and say ha ha ho ho. Okay, Nikita.
Hi, ma'am. I'm still quite annoyed about the fact that I can't see two of you together on screen, but that's fine. So the first time I was introduced to Nisha Susan was obviously in your class, and it didn't matter whether you were Malayali or not. All of us like very equally embraced her. But when I was like when I sort of transformed into this mega Nisha Susan fan was during the pandemic when I was at home and I was just pretty much flopping around like some fish. And then I was telling Arulsa that, you know, I feel some way and my life is not going anywhere. And I was basically crying to him. And he's like, you do one thing. You read Nisha Susan's book is coming out next month. And even before he told me, I'd pre-ordered it on Amazon. So I was happy he mentioned it. Anyway, he mentioned it and he's like, read the book and you write about it. So I read the book and then I wrote about it. And the most wonderful thing that I noticed about her writing is that reading her English is like you're sitting in some corner, you're in some PE class, but you just bunked PE class and you're sitting in some corner with your friend and you're nicely chit-chatting about like all sorts of characters in your classroom. So it feels like there are so many references, even though the topic of this talk is reading Malayalam and writing English. I feel like she borrows less from the language Malayalam and more from the group of people that we call not we call the group of people, the community that is Malayalis. So like in the book, there was an essay that I read many months ago about Malayali men, in which she writes about all the various types of Malayali men that you find like in different corners of the world. And in her recent book, she talks, there's like this random Manju Warrior reference, and from somewhere Arundhati Roy comes in and she's walking around like a mad woman with a laptop. So I want to know, I'd really like to, I want her to talk about who are the people. I feel like she borrows less, as I told, less from the language and more from people. So I want to know who are these people, whose Malayalam is she taking and translate. She basically writes Malayalam in English is what I feel.
But why are you saying she's right here? You say you know.
Oh, that's because your face is on my screen. Sorry. I can't see her on my screen, so yeah.
So I'm not here. That's fine.
No, you are here. I'm talking to you.
No, that's fine. So did you want me to respond to what you just said?
Yes, please.
Okay. So so I had a moment of in the last 5 minutes of feeling like I might embarrass myself by crying very loudly, but so I'm going to address that a little later when I'm not in imminent danger of crying very loudly. Okay, so I'll just respond to your question first. So I think it's accurate that a lot of reviewers or people who responded to my book have only seen it as some act of like courage by including non-English words and not explaining, and I just feel like what's that? Okay, and partly it's because I grew up here and we all switch languages back and forth, and you actually find out what someone's proper language is only in some dire circumstances, right? So I have known, I saw this happen in front of me. I had a friend who met another friend who he went on to marry, and at that moment this man who I have only known as a Tamil speaking person suddenly became extremely Bengali. Okay. And I was like, wait, you're Bangla? And I had like that moment because obviously in my head is this Tamil boy from Tipsandra, okay? And this thing of people switching back and forth, looking Kannadiga and being like extremely like pro Kannadiga, and then you find out that they're actually Tamil, or some super expert, super expert Malayali who will turn out to be like someone who passed through Kerala at some point. I mean, so that's my sense of how language can be your own, right? It's like almost like fashion that you decide at some point, this is my language. And so I didn't think there was anything particularly brave or cool or anything special about writing this way. And partly, like I said, it's because I'm from Bangalore, and partly because I've always felt part of a reading writing community in Bangalore, which is equal parts reading and equal parts writing. Of not just be setting yourself as a professional writer and having a good author photo, but also being really invested in other people's writing and sort of having big fights about it, and saying that the ending of this was total trash, and then sort of seeing the connections. Okay, when this person writes an essay saying, I actually know where this thought started for her because I know she read this essay 3 months ago and that's where this essay is going. So that sort of investment of community is in which I felt my book happened. And honestly, the best thing, and my book has had many nice things happen to it, like it's had good reviews, it has decent sales, all of those things. I feel like honestly the best thing that happened to it was Nikita's essay. And I've said this before, I've said it in an interview, that it's the context of feeling completely understood in the essay, and it's not being understood as, oh, my book is nice and you've picked out nice lines from it. It's not that. It's understanding the context of my writing and placing it in a larger world of women and writers and friendships. And I see that intrinsically linked to the classroom that Vijeta and Arul have created, right? And I mean, again, in that essay that in the interview that happened in Helter Skelter, I did say this because I think this was the best thing that could happen to my book and possibly my writing. I don't know. I mean, if anybody had the good luck to have a book out in this year itself, it was a lot of good luck. But then to have this kind of to find a home in this particular way of readership, that is the best thing that could happen, right? So that's actually the thing that was making me feel like crying. But now the Malayali part. Now, the nice thing about being Malayali is that immediately I stopped feeling like crying. All sentiments depart. Like I can feel the tears drying up in my nose. It's over. Okay, there is no need to feel sad at all. I mean, I can't even say Malayali without having that slight right feeling. Okay, so there is that little bit of like, sure, whatever you say feeling. I don't know what that means. It's a bit of skepticism. It's a bit of desire to be not thought of as a easy mark, to be fooled, to be naive. It's a desire to be like not sentimental. I'm so like tough and all. Okay, but it's for me being Malayali is like trying without even really trying, just standing around and then immediately finding something super funny happening in front of you. And I think that's like it's that's for me as a Malayali person. Like, so if you confront me with some dignified person with like well-ironed clothes and good habits, I don't immediately include them in the Malayali category until of course they open their mouth and they reveal themselves as being just as nonsense as the rest of us. So yeah, so all of that. I don't know whether that really answered your question, but these are things I wanted to say to you, and I have been very decorous ever since you wrote your essay. I did not respond by becoming like totally like sentimental in writing. So now that I have had a chance, I thought I'd do it.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know what to say. Ma'am, Vijeta ma'am.
Say no.
No, I mean, it's only because of the classrooms that we had at Joseph's for 3 years that I was able to. I don't think I would be able to write like that or even read like that before any of that happened. So I think I owe all of it to Professor Vijeta and Arul sir. And there's there's nothing else I can say to it actually. Thank you so much.
Now this is dangerously entering one. हम लोग सभी award लेके बैठ के
Yeah, I think so too.
So something that I've had in mind again was that recently I was told by one uncle, nice uncle, that Vijay writes in English, so she's Brahmin. No.
What?
Yeah.
Shut up. Now you're making it up.
No, it happened. Okay. So if you write in English, you're Brahmin. Okay. So this has happened. I don't know how to respond to that.
Okay.
And I've been thinking about it since then. Now it's definitely one uncle comment, so it's in one uncle box in my head. But outside of that, every time I'm writing, and I notice that the stories that I want to write about are all like, as you pointed out, these. You can't believe that someone would just say that. Like, you were just standing here with so much dignity with your ironed clothes, and now you opened your mouth and it's like Meena Bazaar. What is happening? So that these stories happen in Konkani, in Kannada, and various other languages. And I find that when they come to English, they sort of die a little bit. But in your writing, I've noticed that they never die. That the moments that you pack your stories with, I can always, I think I have a hunch that, okay, this might be the moment why she wrote this story. So every time I'm reading your story, I'm thinking, okay, this is the reason why she wrote this story. This is the moment. This is the moment. I have found it out. It's like that. And at one point when I'm writing these stories in English, and there is one super Konkani moment that will happen. Like, I'll give you an example. My grandmother, my friend came home and she was wearing a sort of low neck top, and my late grandmother told her in Malayalam. I don't understand Malayalam, but later my friend who understood Malayalam laughed and came and told me. So she was bending down, and so my grandmother said, I can see both, cover at least one. Okay. So I didn't know what to do. So I said, oh, okay, fine. My grandmother is like that. So these things happen. And when I try to put them in English, it'll come out happy, it'll come out the way I think it's supposed to come out. But then somewhere down the line, I feel like, arey yaar, no, this is very chappered and this is very kaka. I don't know what to do with it. So how do you finish your story is, I think, my question.
I don't know. Actually, I always struggle with finishing myself. But okay, so I mean the story as a larger thing is always a struggle to finish, right? But the story within the story, which is your cabaret moment or your your Vadivel moment, which you want to insert because the movie has to run a certain way, right? So those moments, I feel like it's easier to work on polishing them in the same way that, say, stand-up comedians, when you watch them, like you're watching millions of them on Insta, some of them you notice they know when to stop. Okay. Some of them, they just milk it a little, like 30 seconds too much. And you feel like, man, if you'd stopped 30 seconds before, I would have laughed a little more, right? So there's that thing of, it's a dangerous thing of you need to have enough confidence to tell the joke, but not so much confidence that you are still laughing but other people have moved on, right? So it's a weird balance of trying to find a place where other people will enjoy themselves more than you are enjoying yourself. Like, you can't be the person laughing the loudest in this joke. So for the story within the story, and especially like you're saying, if you're doing contextual storytelling, like say in one of my stories, there's a story about a tailor, like Blouse Mohan, right? And I thought it was a very funny story because I heard part of it from someone, and then I wrote it, and then obviously it's been years since I wrote it. It's been published now. It's in a book, and then various people write to me and say, "Oh my God, Blouse Mohan is so funny," and to an extent, I've sort of lost why it's funny. I mean, I get it. I get it. I mean, but it's not hysterical in the way that your your grandmother's at least cow is funny. Okay, it's stopped being that funny. So when then you sit down again to write, to capture the place of weirdness where it's still like crazy. That's when you can. When you sit down and you say, "Man, I'm gonna be funny," then it sort of flops, I feel. Then it goes into that slightly PJ territory, which is not bad. I'm like pro PJ only, but it like then you should be clear. Okay, I've cracked a PJ now. All my friends will look at me like this, but you be prepared to be the person who enjoys it the most. Other people won't enjoy it that much. For me, the Blouse Mohan story has moved on, and where it is still funny is that in the Blouse Mohan story, the joke is that the women don't get measured, right? He says, or he doesn't speak, he's just this mysterious god where women come and they drop their palla or their dupatta or whatever, and he looks and then he makes a perfect blouse. That's the story. So it's based on some actual tailor from some place in Kerala. It's like some mythic tailor. So what happened is, after I published the story and I sent it to this famous Malayalam writer called K.R. Meera. I mean, who is like in a mythic god status of her own. Okay. And so at this point, this is some years ago, she called me. So first of all, I was like, and because she's calling me. And then she called me and she said, "Where did you hear this Blouse Mohan story?" I said, "I mean, someone told me I'd do that." So then she said, because I was really scared that I'd gotten something wrong. So she said, no, you don't know what happened to him. So I said, "What happened to him?" He got married, and then now he's not allowed to stitch blouses anymore, only salwars. Okay, so his wife has banned him from like stitching blouses, and this I found hysterical, and this I continue to find funny because it's no longer something I've created, right? It's like the weirdness of the world that has arrived back in my thing. So I think it's a weird place to want. It's a weird desire. I feel like all of us have that desire to tell stories, and I think in some ways education gets in the way and takes away our ability to tell the story naturally. And so, for a lot of people who are not lucky enough to go to good classrooms like yours, when they start writing, it's a lot of unlearning and recapturing their own idiom and tone. But even for people who have decided professionally that now I want to be a storyteller, it's a really weird place because you have to sort of have a very high degree of self-esteem that whatever nonsense that is coming out of your head is interesting to other people, but just enough that you're not a big bore. Okay, it's like a weird balancing act. And I think maybe slightly harder for women, like, because anyway that is self-esteem business is a hard business for us.
Thank you.
Ma'am, this Blouse Mohan thing reminds me that when I went and told my mother about Blouse Mohan, I was telling her about the story, and then she thought Nisha Susan had written the story about her tailor.
What?
And she asked me to go ask Nisha Susan who this tailor was and confirm whether they went to the same tailors as friends with Nisha Susan. I don't know. So
I
this
think
reminded me.
I have to make a map of Blouse Mohan sightings, okay? Because like 7 different people have sworn to me it's their tailor, and it's on all different locations in Kerala. I'm going to like make a map now of like where is Blouse Mohan. It'll be like where is Waldo or like UFO sightings in Kerala, unidentified flying tailor UFT.
Nikita's mother is like a super champion, yeah. Nikita has another story of her mother. Say no, Nikita. Your second question.
No, wait, what? Which story?
The interview.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
What?
Wait, no, I do have a second question. The second question was, I mean, most of my questions revolve around the topic of this discussion. So, when the book came out, there was an article in, I don't remember which Malayalam newspaper, but there was a Malayalam article about your book. And I was slowly reading it because I read in Malayalam very slowly. And so, by the time I got to the halfway through, I was really tired, and I made my mother read it out to me. And so, this question, my mother asked me if you knew any writers from Malayalam writers, and how, because usually when I think of Nisha Susan, I then connected to Parumita Vora and then other women that I've read in class. But since you're doing reading Malayalam, writing English, I want to know if you have friends from Kerala who are writers, because you mentioned K.R. Meera, and I was interested in knowing some, I don't
Sure.
know, some people if you have any.
So I don't, I mean, I don't have like a big, I don't know that many people. I grew up here, so and I'm only getting to know people now. So K.R. Meera, I know because, I mean, I'm a fan, and over the last decade I've slowly gotten to know her. And um, when I worked in Tehelka, we used to run fiction issues. So one of the things that we used to try is that we used to try to include stuff in translation, and so that's how I got to know K.R. Meera back then. And now I'm doing a little bit of work with her. That's how I know her. But actually, this last year has been great because I'm reading a lot of Malayalam novels. It's great as a reader. As a writer, you just want to just retire in life, okay? Because there is such a level of like accomplishment and skill and referencing into some decades. Like, okay, so you open one travelogue which was written in the 80s in some part of Africa, and then you realize, oh, it's not that this dude just went and did some travel in Africa. He's tracking the travel of a previous Malayali writer in 2 decades before that in the same part of Africa. So there's this whole cross-referencing and a sort of show-footedness of being in their own community. So you'll find, as I think just before we started, I was mentioning the scene in S. Harish's
Mustache.
in Mustache. So in Mustache, there's a scene where there is this man who goes to a book launch, and he speaks at this book launch, and it's a small town, and he talks about why stories are important, and he speaks about it in this very simple way. Simple meaning not stupid. This like easy to understand way. And he talks about why storytelling is an important thing, and then immediately some young man in the audience is like some woke dude immediately shames him and says, oh, you know, this political situation is so bad and people are dying, and you're talking about the storytelling like you're a silly fool, that kind of thing. And this man feels like totally stressed, okay? But and he's unable to respond in time, and he's just thinking dirty thoughts about him, and he goes and gets very drunk with his friend afterward. That's his response. But when they're hanging out, his friend and they talk about what is literature, and it's just like half a page in a long book. He says, is literature storytelling and the enjoyment of being transported, or is it analyzing Benjamin's imagery? Okay, Benjamin being a big Malayalam writer also. So there's a sort of casualness about referring to a contemporaneous writer without it being stilted, because he's treating Benjamin as a big public figure in his time, as a real person would. And Benjamin in turn, right, the actual Benjamin, not the passing mention in the book, Benjamin in turn, who's much appreciated critically and widely read, and like he's considered like the top of the game in that sense. He himself will talk about what he's learned from Dan Brown, and how it's important to be able to hook your reader in the first 5 pages of the book. And he says, look, dude, we're competing with web series, so we better be interesting. So there is a sort of like an everydayness about literature. It's not about, oh, now I will think and then fall asleep and then make my readers also fall asleep. Okay. So I really like enjoy that. And so though while I'm reading, people so highly accomplished as Harish and Benjamin and K.R. Mira, their imagination has literally no bound. Okay, like zero. Like even a relatively simple book like I'm saying a relatively simple book like Jasmine Days, which is uh, the accounts of what happens in an imaginary Arab country during Arab Spring, right? Now he could have easily just smacked one Malayali character there who's doing some job, and it would have been perfectly okay to have one Gulf Malayali experiencing the Arab Spring. What is a more obvious thing to do? But no, okay, because Benjamin is incapable of doing something obvious. What has he done? He has his main protagonist, his character through whom which we experience the whole thing, is a Pakistani RJ, a woman RJ who is a Pakistani in a large Pakistani family. And in fact, the only Malayalis that we get is because the radio station shares a space with a Malayalam radio station. It's owned by Malayali. Okay, so the Malayalis are like totally like scammy people in her eyes because she's like sincere and full of like Punjabiyat, and there are these like cynical Malayalis who she has to share the minivan with when they're going back and forth from office and home, right? So this ability to sort of think of the world as your own and to write about Bengali characters and Pakistani characters and have people from anywhere in the world, and one Benjamin novel is set in the island of Diego Garcia, where there is actually nothing. It is just like rocks. Okay, but in his story there is a full Tamil Malayali immigrant is not the right word, but sort of almost expat population living there, and they look on the Indian peninsula as some lost mainland too. And then there is some actual Dan Brownish activity going on in that book. It's got story within story within story, right? So it's very cool. I mean, it's super cool. I can only just stand outside and look enviously, like, and wish, like, oh, if only I had joined this school, like that feeling. They have such a nice uniform, like that sort of feeling.
Say, Nikita, you were going to say something?
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just imagining the standing outside of school, fantasizing about somebody else's uniform.
So I mentioned Nikita's mother because Nikita found this interview of yours in Malayalam, in the Malayalam newspaper, and she was trying to read it very slowly, and her mother grabbed the newspaper and said, "You go, I'll read it." She started reading it fast.
So even that was a kind of amazing experience actually, because this was a very busy reporter who had obviously 400 other things to do that day, and we had a very quick interview. It must have been 15 minutes or something. And then if you look at that piece, it's so super competent. I'm telling you, as a journalist, if I had done a 15-minute interview of a writer and done it, like, it's a short piece also, I wouldn't have managed to pack it in with so much facts and contextualized it and everything. I mean, it's a kind of confidence, right? It's a kind of confidence of, sure, I have to go do some crime story after this and some health story tomorrow morning, but I also know how to cover literature. There's no problem. Like, I'm not out of this game. It's really, I mean, like, I know I'm romanticizing the Kerala literary scene, but honestly, from the outside, it's magnificent. It's just like thrilling because it's people read, people write, people seem to write whatever they feel like, and there are readers for it. It's just very, very exciting.
How much of your journalism, which happens in English, is influenced by what you've grown up watching? Because in your fiction, there is that clearly Indian English writing, and there is, as Nikita has pointed out, Karchif Kumaris and a lot of other influxes like this. But you began writing as a short story writer, if I am not wrong, when you, oh no, it was Entu Pataki when you were in your MCC, from your MCC days.
Yes. So no, I mean, yeah. So it's one of those things. As in, there's a sort of joke about there's a joke about my mother that since we are telling mother jokes, which are like a full category in itself, there's a joke about my mother that when I was in Bangalore in my early 20s, and I had some assignment that I was dragging my feet on and not doing it, and my mom was visiting because my mom lived in the Gulf at that point, and she came over to see me, and so I was like spending all the time that I could hanging out with her, and also avoiding the work that I was supposed to do. And we were standing in the balcony and talking to each other, and I was having some deep and thoughtful moment, and my mother turned to me apropos of nothing and said, "Poi eldadi," okay, which is, get out and go right, girl, okay. And it's like my friends and I have always joked about that moment. It's like some antithesis to everything that you hear about women and writing and how much space you get in your house to that. So I think just always being treated as if it's a real thing, writing is a real thing, that obviously helped a lot. But this thing of how much of my writing has gone into my journalism, that's a real thing too. Especially if you go to Delhi, you don't need to leave the country to feel like diaspora, okay? You just need to go to Delhi. Like you go to Delhi and you immediately start having diaspora feelings. I was also like, I will also write about my feelings of alienation, okay? And I will also start talking about myself as a brown person or something. I mean, it's like a real risk, okay?
Grandmother's pickles and all.
Grandmother's pickle, whatever, man. I mean, forget the fact that I never got along with my grandmother. All that will be like fully like cancelled in that moment. So, you really have to hold strong and feel like, no, Rajnikant is not the only thing in south of the Vindhyas. There are serious things, and there are lots of things that I don't know. For instance, if you are the one South Indian journalist in the newsroom, you will be asked to comment on everything from Rajnikant to PFI to whatever. And the holding strong also involves saying, actually, no, I'm not an expert in this matter, though I might look like I am. Okay, but so yeah, it does help to have some sense of literally where you come from, to narratively figure out where you come from.
Do these feed into each other? Like what I'm asking is, have you, like when you go reporting, do you ever think like, "Arey, this story I should have written in Malayalam, it would have been funnier," or do you then take it and put it in your fiction?
I think it's like, I don't think it quite works like that. I think my impulse to write is always in English, but it's a weird English, no? It's mediated by all these other things. So, and also the nice thing about actually becoming diaspora late in life, which is, when I was almost 30 and not when I was 15, is that you don't know that there is anything wrong. You're like, cool person. So then when somebody at almost 30 tells you you're not a cool person or your sentences are wonky or whatever, I don't mean it quite like that. I mean that there is then, you suddenly see how English is supposed to be. There is a sort of rhythm to traditional English and whatever. And since it came to me very late in life, these comparisons of what lyrical writing is, and something mellifluous, whatever other words that are used in blurbs, because it was too late. First of all, let me just say, it was too late to become lyrical or mellifluous. But so then whatever I had was what I could write in, and so that English is what I write in. Obviously, when you're telling the story aloud to somebody else, it's much funnier to say it in whatever language people said it in. But the effort is to replicate that sound and feeling as much as possible in English, because that's what we have to deal with. So I wish I was truly bilingual. I have friends who write in multiple languages, and it's a great gift. But now this is what I have. So
Every time I talk to you, I feel less afraid of writing, because one thing that I was consciously telling myself through the times when I started writing was that I shouldn't tell this story to 100 people, because the energy will go away, and then it'll go off as in some booth pret type thing, like superstitious voodoo magic, that if I tell it again and again, it'll go off. But you're one of the few people who doesn't seem to give a damn about that. Like, you tell one story to 5 people, and then that energy will still be there even in your writing. And I'm wondering how much of this is because for you, your relationship with writing, as I read in one of your interviews, it's like a workman's kind of relationship. Like you just have to get it done and throw it out there.
Yeah. So yeah, material is definitely something that I respect. Like, so I think of, I do think of things as material, and I do think of it as, should I use it? What does it mean? Does it mean anything that I've told the story before to people? Is it anecdotal, or is it something that will also give enjoyment in writing? So that I do think of it that way. The other thing is also, having told the story to 5 of my friends and having had them laugh a lot does give you confidence to say that now 10 more people who are not my friends but potentially could be my friends, will also enjoy it. I mean, one has to sort of think of it as if, like, at least that's how I think of it, that as if, you just sort of gone and you're standing next to them and they have the book, but actually you're just whispering in their ear. And then as they reach that part, you're nudging them and saying, is it fun? Is it fun? And so that, I mean, like, that feeling is what carries me through the writing process. But having said that, I also am aware, as I grow older, I'm very stressed about becoming a bore. Okay, it's like one of my major stresses. Like, I lie awake at night and think, shit, is this the day? Okay, is this the day you're going to tell some really trashy, sad story, and some poor young person will have to laugh at your joke and have that expression. So I'm still in, like, 6 months into book one. So but my mind has galloped ahead to 2 years from now, where I have become a gigantic boring person. So I am stressed, but and as you rightly point out, the stress goes back to this feeling of, I must create something good which can provide enjoyment to other people. It's not it's not only for, like, my kicks, though it's a lot for my kicks, but it's also for other people's kicks.
Thank you. I think we've hijacked you for 45 minutes, and people who have questions, you can leave them on your chat box, and Nisha Susan will answer those questions for you. Try and keep your questions short, and otherwise you'll keep typing and the meeting will be over, and then and don't give. Okay, yeah, please give your questions. I was reminded by something you said, which is that I have, and maybe this is a question only you can answer at this point, which is that, no, actually, let me begin with a cheesier question. I've always wanted to know this, which is that, so those of you who have known Nisha Susan's writing elsewhere must go and check out her blog, which I hope she doesn't know still exists, because then she'll go and delete it. It's called the Live Journal one, which is where I discovered more of her Delhi writing. So the diasporic Nisha Susan, if you want to read, go and read the Live
complaining bitterly and whining.
Journal. In those uh, blog posts, what I saw was you were heading. I mean, I definitely knew that one day you will publish a book. And I think when I discovered you, I was 24, and I don't know how old you were, but it always when I started reading you, it always felt like, yeah, she's going to publish a book, and we'll have to wait for that someday. So I'd read the same blog posts over and over and over again until I created a Nisha Susan in my head who could, and this is something that in the first few years of my teaching, when I used to be very afraid of boys in classrooms who would sort of try to bully me or whatever, one thing that Arul sir kept telling me was, what do you think Nisha Susan would have done in this situation?
What?
And yeah, and this is something that I carried with me in the classroom very often, and she would laugh at them, laugh at them. And this laughter is what I kept returning to on your blog. It's called the chasingiamb.livejournal.com. I'll put the link down there later. So this laughter caused me to sort of get rid of some of my anxieties as a teacher in the classroom. But more importantly, what it prepared me was to receive your book as a reader later whenever you publish it. But I've only looked at that angle from as a reader. I've never imagined what it must be like for you as a writer to have finished this book and submitted it and to have received your first copy.
I don't know. So, okay, now I have to tell many truths. It's all very embarrassing. Okay.
Tell us.
So, this book came out in 2020. I signed my book contract in 2017, and I was due to produce this book completely unrelated to this in 2018. Between 2017 and 18, I had a child and also proceeded to be very distracted. Okay, so then I was like, oh, and I was filled with shame. Okay, because deadline missing is like it really shames me. Like I try to get it at least like 1 hour before and all. So it's just, or if I'm late, I mean, I can't deal with it in a normal way. I just go into some spiral. So by 2018, I was already in the spiral, and then various people told me, no, it's fine. Even my publishers told me it's fine. I am told that the salespeople, when they found out that I'm having a baby and that's why the book is delayed, they clapped. So anyway, so other people were normal. I was not, is what I'm saying. Then I found myself completely unable to write that book, which required a lot of traveling, a lot of thinking, and I couldn't write it. And then so then I was like, okay, I'll try to write now. And then I found myself pregnant again. Okay. So at which point I felt like my publishers were going to throw me out. And then I met an acquaintance of mine who told me that there's a Sophia Loren movie. I don't know, guys. I don't know whether I've told you the story, but if I have, please stop me. So apparently there's a Sophia Loren movie in which Sophia Loren's husband does some crime. And then Sophia Loren says that she has only done the crime because she's pregnant. And then under the Italian law, she can't go to jail. So then she has the baby. So now they're going to come and catch her, the police. So then quickly she gets pregnant again. So according to my friend, I have not watched this movie. I went and saw the synopsis. It had like, I think she has six babies or something in an attempt not to go to jail. Okay. So he told me in this moment of great wisdom, why don't you also do this? Then you don't have to give the book. I was like, shut up, man. I'm trying to produce book, not more babies. Okay. But so basically what I'm saying is finally at one moment, I was just like, I have to get on with my life and get out of this stuck mess. So then I suggested to my publishers that we do the short stories first. Otherwise, the short stories were not due to come out. So then I did the short stories, and luckily for me and for publishers and for Sophia Loren, it worked out. It was fine. Okay. So in the moment that I handed the manuscript to my editor, so my book came out in August. This is in February. We met in a coffee shop. It's one of those like tender memories I have now because there was coffee and like, like public space. It was a very exciting moment. I should have valued it much more. So anyway, so we did like lots of time pass, and then I handed it over, and my editor, Kartika VK, said, in like passing like this, she said something to me, and I said, oh, that's so funny. And then she said, that's so funny. And then she came up with an idea for a whole new book. So basically, as you can understand, I'm handing in my manuscript and I have now agreed to do another book. Okay. So when the book came out in August, I was already in a state of extreme tension. Okay, because half the year has now passed and I have done nothing. Okay. And my editor, both my editors are these very good-looking women who can look like strict and forgiving, and I know what is going on in your head all at once. It's a gift. Okay. So every time I see them or speak to them or everything, I start feeling like this shaky feeling. So between August and now, I have committed to doing 3 different books. So basically what I'm saying is, don't do it. Like, try to enjoy your book. Okay. Try to enjoy your book fully before you commit to writing new books. Okay. So if, I have these like various whiteboards and notebooks and Google spreadsheets and basically lots of anxiety about not meeting my deadline. So that's what it is. Do not, yeah, something.
Nikita,
Anyway.
you have a question?
No, I just, when she said she told us a story about, I mean, you told us a story about your mother telling you to poi elthadi. And my mother also told me that, like, at least once a month she tells me that. And I wanted to ask you, there are some things like poi elthadi, the feelings of which you can't really like write in English. Like, it's, how do you tell people what it feels like to hear your mother say that? So what do you feel annoyed about, something?
Yeah, I do feel some. Actually, it's weird that you asked me that. Last week I was trying to translate Poya Elthadi just for fun. I was like, let me try to translate it. Okay, how do I translate it? So then it was more like, get thee to your desk.
Wow.
Okay, because I was like, only that gives the full feeling of like Mother Superior shouting at you. Okay, because
Yes.
I didn't feel like a direct translation would help. But yeah, of course, some things don't work exactly. It's okay. I mean, I'm all right with that. I mean, I think as long as I have like 3 friends to whom I could tell things in the language it was intended, I'm okay. I don't
Yes.
mind.
Same here. Wait, I think we have a lot of questions in the
We
chat
do?
box.
I can't see any questions.
Usually, let me just tell you, after my events, there are no questions because I have talked so much, people have run away. Okay, and now I've been in 20 events, there are no questions ever. It's only my high self-esteem which is holding us here.
Apparently, there are 4 questions.
Oh my God, I'm shocked.
No, man, there are more than 4.
Your students have more
I
questions.
can't see any questions. Where are these questions? Nikita, please start reading the questions
Okay,
out.
the first question is, do you keep a journal? And if you do, has it helped you with the writing?
So I used to keep a journal for a very long time. I kept a journal from the time I was 6 till I was about 22 or 21. Basically, as soon as the internet arrived, I stopped keeping a journal because the internet was like so good and there's no time for stupid things like writing in diary and all when you could be Googling things. Also, every week I would start a new blog. Okay, so Vijay ma'am knows about 1 or 2. There are 400 others. Okay. There are 400 others which I have run for 1 week or 2 weeks because I was just like compulsive about making blogs. But the question of does it help? Yeah, it really does help. Just writing practice of any kind helps. I mean, you could write about, what you're watching or what you're reading or your neighbor's balcony or one more COVID message that makes you want to cry. Anything. And then just writing practice in any form is helpful.
Did it never annoy you if, like, did your parents never try to read your journals or diary entries, or did that never happen to you?
I don't know. Maybe they did. As in, I had one incident of my father reading some letters a boy sent me. It ended with many troubling and upsetting events, including "you will never go to school again." Okay, so I think that was the biggest violation of privacy, and I think my father learned his lesson there because you don't want to
read all my
find out
journals.
these things.
So I used to write and set fire to them.
What?
She read all my journals. So it felt like writing. So I'd write and set them on fire so she wouldn't find them. Then now I feel bad. I wish I'd saved them.
I know, right?
Then we have a longish, nice-ish question by Aditi SS, I think. She says, Ma'am, firstly, I loved your book. It is the best thing that happened in 2020. My question is that all the characters you write sound very personal. What I mean is that when reading the book, I felt like it was a one-woman show and you were playing all the parts. I love that they were so dynamic and so extremely different, but reading them felt so natural and personal. How do you manage to do that? I'm sorry if I confused you, but just wanted to know how you write these amazing characters. Amazing characters.
Oh, sweet. What a sweet question. First of all, I really like the idea of being one of those, like, people with one bag with many props and like masks and becoming this crazy person every 3 seconds. But I think, I don't know. I'm very glad that people like the characters and all. I don't know. I like I said, I think a lot of my effort is to make it sound like literally sound interesting. So sometimes when you read stuff out loud, whether it sounds like slightly tired or fake. Like your own ear will tell you accurately whether it sounds fake because most people are very good at hearing that. So I do that a lot. And like I said, like Vijay said, I have a lot of practice in telling stories to people. So some of it is that, okay, so you try and work out what works, what doesn't work. You try your material on innocent victims as they are passing by. So that's really it. I think if you take interest in other people, they are almost guaranteed to give you like solid material.
While writing, are you worried about not being taken seriously as a writer when including your mother tongue?
No, yeah. No, not at all.
पोस्टर को पढ़ो ठीक से किसी ने भी जो सवाल पूछा.
Wow.
Then, do you ever just get into the cycle of just reading and not wanting to write anymore?
No. So what I get into the cycle is watching a lot of TV and not wanting to do anything anymore. So that's what it is. Like lots of TV. My God, how much TV? It's just shocking. So yeah. So TV is like my big enemy because I love it. So now actually I'm on this like rigorous mission to read more. So earlier, like say in college and even until maybe a decade ago, I would read several books a week. So in college, it was completely normal to read several books a week because everybody is doing it. You would also do it. But later, when I was working, also I managed to read quite a bit, and I read for work, and it was great. But over the last 5 6 years, I don't even mean that it's only watching TV actively, that time of TV which is taking away from my reading. I feel like my brain is not also able to read as easily as I did before. So it's like, someone who's like a really good sports person and then they sort of become out of shape because they haven't run in a long time, and then you have to really train to get back to even a modicum of that speed. So I'm now training myself to read again by like saying, no, you've got to read, and you do get back into the thing quickly. Yeah, the not writing part is rarely about being overcome by other people's reading, or it's usually anxiety. It's just like not writing is usually a lot about anxiety. So I mean I had a bit of that this year because I just felt like a giant fraud. Whatever I was writing just felt like off, but you just keep at it and don't tell anybody until you fixed it, and then you fix it and then you're like, oh, in the past I was so anxious, now I am so okay.
But I feel like you watching TV shows actually is entertainment for a lot of us because you post Insta posts about that. Last year you watched Zindagi Gulzar Hai.
Oh my God, it was so great.
And then I
I just
watched
felt
it.
like such a late person watching it so late. It was so great. Oh,
Yeah,
what
I
a
watched it after that, and then I got 5 other people to watch it. Because
it was so good. I'm really looking for something like more on that. I actually ended up watching the new Spanish version of Ugly Betty, and it's remarkably trashy, but also it's
is
got,
it the one on Netflix?
yeah, it's Betty in New York, that
Yeah,
one.
even I tried watching it, but it
Yeah,
was
it's
okay.
remarkably trashy, but it's also great. Got amazing side characters. Like if you ignore Betty and her main thing, all the side characters are phenomenal.
Yeah, one last question.
Please.
How did you draw yourself out of the Delhi diasporic writing? I
So
think it's
sweet.
going to be a Twitter thing now. Everyone is going to call it Delhi diaspora now.
It's so funny. So actually, it's very helpful because rent is very high in Delhi. Okay, so when I thought to myself that I wanted to do other kinds of work, I had a full-time job. I had gotten married. My husband had a full-time job. So we both worked together. We got married. We took leave, and then we were working through our time off, and then we came back. And then everybody was like, very good, settle ho gaye. Now they will become like hardcore working type people. And then we both resigned within 2 days because plane running through our Microsoft Teams like a full choo-choo train. No, it's gone. Okay. Okay. So anyway, so I quit and my husband quit, and then we had to pay rent. So then we were like, oh, Delhi rent, very scary. Let us go to Bangalore where rent is less scary. So that was really it. We just moved back here and we had some Vago plan, and and we continue to live here. It's great.
Nikita, can you see any more questions? I'm not able to see on my chat box.
Someone asked her, how do you deal with a creative block? Do you get creative blocks?
No. Oh, there are many questions below. Oh, this. I see who has asked me this diasporic writing question. I think it's really Bharti. Answer, please. Because I've learned about so many books from Bharti. That's why. And yeah. So, what question? Creative block? No, it's not a creative block. I don't have creative blocks like that, but I do have like periods of like feeling like a productivity block. Honestly, it's only recently that I've understood what that problem is. It's a journalism problem, which is of feeling like you have a deadline, and the deadline is more important than most other things. What you have to produce. So nowadays, because I'm trying to write something book length, and I don't know how to do it. I'm only learning how to do it. When I sit down and I'm usually able to finish whatever I'm setting out to do in a couple of hours. That is not possible with the book length thing. You have to revisit a chapter again and again and again and again, and then you just feel like, why is this damn thing not done already? So then I have this, like, I'm saying with this with clarity now, but mostly I've spent many months feeling miserable and not able to understand why I was miserable. And it's really this feeling that it should have been done already. And I'm only teaching myself now that that's not how it works, and you have to give it as much, well, not as much time. My editor shouldn't hear this, but more time, more time than a usual article. You need more time. You need more time to think and just, you know, a friend taught me a new word which I'm using everywhere now: expansiveness. You need to bring expansiveness into your life. Okay, that's the only way you can do it, at least. So yeah, so otherwise I get very anxious about not having finished, you know.
I think we have one final question. Somebody wants to know, what is the most fun part about reading and writing in Malayalam? I don't think you write in Malayalam.
No, actually, I write very poorly in Malayalam. Like, if you ask me to write a sentence, I'd be like struggling. I am actually trying to teach myself to write again. Like, I read fluently. Like, I am now on the verge, guys, of becoming a professional translator. Do not laugh. But if I had to do it the other way around, like if I had to translate from English to Malayalam, I can't even write like your poster. I wouldn't be able to write in Malayalam without making 20 mistakes. So Malayalam, I have to, the writing part I have to learn again. What's the most fun thing about reading and writing in Malayalam? Actually, the entire enterprise is fun. I never get bored. I can read like I can read the Malayalam newspaper front page and have a good laugh. Okay, like how can you say that anytime? My favorite front page story of all time was a really horrific story about Kannur, but the Malayalam Manorama front page said Kannuril Dracula. Okay, Kannurinte തെരുവിൽ കൂടെ രക്തമൊഴുകി, which is like the streets of Kannur had like blood flowing, but the headline said Kannuril Dracula. So I was like, what? Okay, and then I read it, and it was about some like two political parties beating each other over the heads, okay, and like having some like genuinely bloody warfare. But this is what some extremely respectable paper decided to put on their front page. So it's never boring. I encourage everyone to read in Malayalam.
What do you see, Nikita Thomas? Do you see questions?
Oh, there's one more question that just arrived. If there's one piece of advice you could give your 19-year-old self, what would it be? As a writer.
As a writer, you know, I think I was the world's luckiest 19-year-old as a writer, because I had super excellent friends and teachers, and I went to a girls' college, which is really helpful if you're a girl, because you know how TV is distracting for me now. Boys were very distracting back then, so it really takes away a lot of time. But the nice thing is that boys are also very good material, so you can just make notes is all I should say. Make notes if you are a 19-year-old writer. At some point, you'll want to look at it.
This is the question that Nikita Thomas, if I remember correctly, had for you when she touched you publicly. She said, I said, so basically to give you the backstory, people, Nisha Susan had a panel at BIC, if I'm not wrong, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And Nikita Thomas was there at the panel, and she came running to me and she said, can I touch her? I said, I don't know. You have to go ask her why you want to touch her. She said, yeah, I want to just go touch her. So I said, okay, go touch her. I said, you have to ask her a question. She said, I want to know if she cries, if she's ever cried over boys.
Oh shit, yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah,
It's
she
coming
told
back
me
to
that
me.
she cried over random boys inside autos on rainy days. It was a very specific, very particular thing to do. And I wasn't the only one who wanted to touch her. A lot of people wanted to touch her, but I was the only one who got
Guys, this is becoming like extremely like, I don't know. I don't know what to feel. I'm running out of like suitable adjectives. Yeah, but crying in autos was part of my extracurricular activities. I did a lot of it.
So,
Okay, I
हमको
think
question
we've run out
करेंगे?
of questions.
No questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nisha Susan.
It was my pleasure.
It was an amazing
Thank you.
1 hour. Meta
And now we just have to wait for your book, Vijay, and your book, Nikita. Oncoming. Why only I should have that expression? You can also have that expression.
I'm taking your advice very seriously.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you
Thanks
so
guys.
much for doing
Bye.
this. Meta 2021 is very, very happy.
Me too.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Thank you, Nikita Thomas, for doing this for us. We will now see you at Just a Minute Jam, the link to which will be posted here on the chat box. So you can join us at Jam. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Nisha Susan ji. Hi, Nikita Thomas. Why
Bye,
did
ma'am.
you take part in Jam?
No, ma'am, not jam. I have never taken part in jam because I can't talk at that rate.
Oh, wait, can you see in the chat box, can you see the link to Jam? Have they posted it there?
No, not yet.
It's there, ma'am. So,
Click it. Yeah, there is one. But
There
a
is.
lot of people are leaving and the link is just going.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now you can leave it again. Okay, thank you, people, for joining us. We will see you at Jam, and then we will see you tomorrow also. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, Nikita.